Welcome back to another episode of Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation, right here on Verde Valley TV and KVNA 104.7 FM. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. We have got a great show in store for you this week. Later in the program, we'll be joined by Camp Verde High School Athletic Director Dan Wall, who will break down the school's transition from 2A sports to 3A this season. We'll then be joined by Flagstaff track and field coach Mathew Barquin, who will talk about growing youth track and field in the Flagstaff area. But on the other side of this break, we'll be joined by Flagstaff baseball coach Michael DoBosh to discuss region representation that we saw in the 4A state playoffs this year. All of that and a whole lot more coming up off the bench. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Two things we can count on every year.
A new set of tax rules and great weather here in Northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. I am joined by a familiar face of the program. Just wrapped up I almost said the fall season, just wrapped up the spring season here in 2021. It is Flagstaff High School baseball coach Michael DoBosh. Coach DoBosh, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're happy to have you back. You've got some interesting images behind you, and I definitely am curious as to what those are. Unfortunately, we do have a radio audience, so we won't get too into it. Obviously, Coach DoBosh, along with coaching the program, is also a teacher at Flagstaff High School. So what do you teach, Coach, just real quick?
I teach biology and human anatomy. So yeah. I
had a feeling it looks like are the photos behind you. Again, it's going to be horrible for the radio side of things, and I apologize, but there are some images behind Mr. DoBosh. He's got his lab coat on. Is that, I'm going to really reach back with my information, is that skin cells?
No, those aren't skin cells. Those are actually pictures I got from Gore, which obviously is a big business here in Northern Arizona, on some of the products that they provide to the medical community. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. So great. This is why I do sports and I don't do science. Coach, great season. First and foremost, congratulations on completing the fall. Oh my gosh, I did it again. Congratulations on completing the spring season. I know there was a lot of issues and a lot of COVID questions that were surrounding the entire year, but the team was able to finish not only first in the 4A Grand Canyon region, congratulations on another region title, but also a top 5 finish in the 4A conference. How did you feel just in general, before we look to the playoffs, how did you feel how the regular season went this year? Oh, obviously, I mean, we were 18-1. Obviously that's a great season for us. I can't remember a season like that prior to this year. So it was great to have a season. I'll say that first and foremost. And we had no issues, COVID related issues. So that was awesome as well. So, it was just great to be back on the field and watching those kids play. So.
You got a first-round matchup against number 12 St. Mary's. You guys end up beating them 11-1. You go into the second round against a very tough South Point Catholic team. Can you just take me through that game?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously a tough game. They're a great team, great program. Coach Preble does a great job with them down there. Very talented group, but so were we, and we felt good going into the matchup. We broke out in the first inning, and Silas hits a big 3-run home run. And then we take the lead and we carry that lead into the fourth inning, into actually the fifth inning. We had the lead 3-2 going into that inning. we made a couple mistakes in that inning. We made there's a few plays we could have made early. We could have got out of that inning without any damage. Unfortunately, the mistakes led to some runs, and they take the lead, and we could not overcome that. So, but super proud of the kids, the way they played. Obviously, it's a tough road trip for us going down there. Playing in the heat. Playing a very difficult team, but I thought the kids did a great job.
Well, again, like I said, Coach, congratulations on the season and completing the year. What did you tell your seniors? You got a good core of seniors. I believe you're graduating 8 this year. What did you tell those guys after the game?
Just, how proud we were of them. We said this, and the whole coaching staff said this, number of times, just what a joy it was to watch them play. It was so exciting. I'd have bought a ticket. That's how much fun watching these kids, particularly these seniors, play their last year at Flagstaff High School. So just that we're proud of them, that, they had some amazing things happen on the baseball field this year. And they're going to look back on it. Obviously, the loss at that moment stings. Right. They're going to look back on the season and have really good memories of what they accomplished.
Very much so, Coach. I obviously got an opportunity to see the Flagstaff Eagles when they traveled down here to Cottonwood to take on the Mingus Marauders. And, one of the guys we're going to talk about here in a second is senior Justin Hansen, the big lefty. But you're very much correct. It was a very, very fun game to watch. Of course, while I am the broadcaster for the Marauders, I'm a baseball fan nonetheless. And I love watching a guy like Justin Hansen go on the mound and work very, very well and work quickly through batters. And but you had a couple other pitchers on the roster as well. Teague Van Dyke was one of the guys who pitched very well for you. Silas Cleary, who you just mentioned, a two-way player for you, a guy who pitches, also a guy who plays the infield. I believe he plays third. As you mentioned, he hit a huge home run against St. Mary's, against South Point Catholic. But Coach, let's go back to Justin Hansen. The kid's 6'5", pumps about 90 plus on his fastball. I got a chance to see Justin firsthand. And as somebody who's 25 and hasn't been in high school for the past 7 years, I was shaking a little bit seeing that tall kid up on the mound. But how rare, we talk about the talent in Northern Arizona, but how rare is it to find somebody like that who is honestly borderline minor leagues level fastball, definitely college level fastball at such a young age?
Yeah, definitely rare. That's probably, a once in a lifetime in terms of my career, having a kid that big that throws that hard. So that just awesome to watch him go out there and do what he does. Obviously, I would not want to step into the batter's box and face him for sure. So he had a great year. He ended up being the defensive player of the year in the Grand Canyon region because of his performances on the mound. He threw the St. Mary's game and did a great job shutting them down. So we were hoping to get past South Point and get to the next round and let him throw again. But, obviously that didn't happen. But yeah, just so proud of him and what he's done, and how hard he's worked to get to the place he's at right now. So I'm looking forward to watching him and hearing about him in college. So.
A couple guys on the offensive side of things, just kind of stepping away from the defensive side of things, but junior Tristan Figueroa, obviously Silas Cleary, we just mentioned, and also senior Sam Schmitz were the three guys who led in batting average this year. Who else stood out for you as a whole here in 2021?
Yeah, I think Gabe Faust, another senior, he played a little bit of second, a little bit of short when Silas pitched. He hit in the 400s this year. He's going off to Barella College, I believe. I think that might be in Kansas, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double check that. But he had a great year. The freshman, Luke Hughes, had a great year. He had some injury problems there later on in the season, but had a really good first 12 or 13 games. Spencer Smith, a junior that will be returning, had a really good offensive year as well. So there was definitely some kids that really performed well. Sam Schmidt, like you mentioned, he seemed to always have a big 2-out RBI base hit somewhere during the game. So definitely some kids that obviously contributed to our success.
Right, very much so. And as I mentioned, the Eagles winning the 4A Grand Canyon region this year and also getting an opportunity to play in the second round, beat St. Mary's in the first round of the playoffs and then lost to South Point Catholic in the second round. We are speaking with Flagstaff High School baseball coach Michael DoBosh. Coach, kind of looking forward to next year. Justin Hansen is on his way to Yavapai College. Any other guys who might be playing at the next level?
Yeah, Silas Cleary will go on and play. He's deciding between a few schools right now, I believe. Sam Schmidt is going to Doane University. I think that's in Nebraska. And
Very
like
cool.
I mentioned, Gabe Faust will be going to, I think it's called Barella College. So yeah, those four will be going on. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing about great things from them in their college days. So.
Yes, very much so. And best of luck, of course, to all of them and all their ventures. Really cool that Justin Hansen's going to be staying local. Hopefully, he'll get an opportunity to, in all honesty, hopefully all of them will get an opportunity to accomplish whatever they want to accomplish. I know a lot of guys will go to the community college route and then try to get a bigger scholarship down the line. So hopefully it all works out for all of them. Hansen is quite a talent. Silas Cleary as well. All those guys deserve to be on D1 rosters. But, Coach, next season, you're graduating 8 seniors this year. You do return some solid talent. We mentioned Teague Van Dyke. We mentioned Luke Hughes, obviously. Is there any upcoming talent, any guys who might be coming in from the middle school level or maybe even more specifically the JV level? Any guys you're looking at for next season to sort of fill some of those gaps?
Yeah, there are. And obviously, as a high school coach, you're busy coaching the varsity, but you know what's happening at the lower levels and who's coming through the system and looking forward to seeing those kids eventually make the varsity. I think, Luke Wilson is a JV kid that we look forward to seeing next year. Heath Lopez, another JV kid that we look forward to seeing next year. Connor Stickler, again, we're hopeful to see great things on the varsity next year. So we definitely have some kids coming up, and we're looking forward to working with those kids this summer. The varsity coach is getting a chance to work with them and see what they can do as well. And the seniors this year, obviously they set the bar
right
pretty high, and that's what we're going to preach to our kids that are coming into the program is we need to try and maintain that level. So,
Coach, what's one thing you do to sort of ease that transition from JV to varsity?
I think the summer program is a big key to that, getting them used to varsity level pitching. The speed of the game, at the varsity level ramps up a little bit as well. So I think just having them experience that throughout the summer and playing as many games as we can during the summer at that level of competition, I think that helps, ease the transition into the varsity level.
Just ask Justin Hansen to come back and pump about 90 at him. I'm sure they won't fear any other pitcher they see going forward if they can hit off Justin Hansen.
Yeah, that's true for sure.
You kind of alluded to it a little bit, Coach. Summer workouts, summer programs, any youth camps, any club ball we can look forward to coming up this summer?
Yeah, we run a team in the summer called the Bruins. It's the club team that we use here in the Flagstaff area. And we'll run 2 teams. We'll run an older team and a younger team. Most of the games are in northern Arizona, either Prescott or Flagstaff. So we'll play some local schools and also some schools out of the valley. We're going to run the 4th of July tournament again this year with some of the bigger schools. Sal Point will come up, so it'll be good to see them again. Mesquite will be here. Mountain Point, some of the bigger names will be up here. So that'll be a fun tournament as well.
Yeah, very much so. And, Coach, you talk about sort of hosting those youth camps and the club ball as well. I guess let's try more club ball more specifically. We've just got a couple more questions here. But where do you feel that club ball has fit into high school sports now? I've got a chance to ask a couple baseball coaches this question, and I want to pass that question off to you because you do run a club team. So I know you don't have to battle with a high school coach. There's been some sort of, the club coach will say something and the high school coach will say something, and you have that bit of miscommunication, but you get to control both sides. So for you, in your experience, how have you utilized club ball to your advantage?
Yeah, for us, it's a little different in Flagstaff versus maybe Phoenix or Tucson, where a lot of those high school coaches and teams are competing against club coaches and teams as well. And we feel like we need to provide a club experience for our kids in Flagstaff so that they can compete during the high school season. I also think club ball is very important in the off season in the fall. If kids want to get some exposure, I recommend that they find a club team out of the valley that they can play for and go to some of those big tournaments and get some exposure to college coaches and things of that nature. Meet other kids, meet other coaches, play and enjoy baseball. As long as they're staying healthy, as long as they're taking the appropriate amount of time off, I think that's probably the most important thing is that they understand what a full year of baseball looks like and when they can get, time off, particularly from throwing a baseball, so that they're not causing any damage to their arms. But I think club ball has a huge role in improving kids as long as it's done correctly. And like I said, I think in Flagstaff, it really helps getting kids a little bit more baseball exposure.
I did get a chance to speak with Prescott baseball coach Kent Winslow about that same topic. And I asked him, as Coach Winslow is retiring after this season, I asked him, I was like, what have you seen change the most? And he said that club ball was the one thing throughout his career that he has seen become more and more prominent in high school sports. And like I just said, you run a club team, you're a high school coach, you're also a club coach. So it's definitely something that has stayed in the sort of circle of baseball and softball, those club teams. But you don't see a whole lot of, like you said, the more in the Phoenix area, you'll see the separation there. But here in Northern Arizona, you don't see that separation. But Coach, before we let you go, I got one last question for you. Of course, Flagstaff is included in this list, but there were two other teams that also made the postseason out of the 4A Grand Canyon region. And you could say Lee Williams just barely missed the cusp. They were 17. They needed to get into 16 and unfortunately did not make the playoffs. But representation, Coach, we saw it on the softball side. We're seeing it here on the baseball side. What can you speak to the talent that is here in the 4A Grand Canyon region on the baseball side?
Yeah, great talent in our region. I think the Grand Canyon region, does a great job of getting teams into the playoffs and then competing once they get in. And so super proud of Coconino program, and also the Bradshaw program. They had really good teams this year and what they've accomplished in getting into the state playoffs. So hopefully that continues. Hopefully the talent in the region continues, and we continue to see teams make it to the postseason.
Well, one team that we know will probably be hanging around the postseason for a little while are the Flagstaff Eagles. And Coach DoBosh, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. We'll have to bring you back to talk a little bit of club sports down the line in the summertime. But congratulations on the season, Coach. As I mentioned at the top, COVID-19 was just hovering around the year, and there were a lot of questions if we were even going to get a spring season, if we were going to have a canceled one just like we did in 2019. But we came back. Or I should say in 2020. We came back here in 2021. We're able to finish the year. Congratulations on another region title. You run a fantastic program, and we look forward to speaking with you in the near future.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me today.
Of course. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Camp Verde Athletic Director Dan Wall. We'll talk a little Cowboy sports here on Off the Bench. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Two things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in Northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome back to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports. I am joined now by Camp Verde Athletic Director, Coach Dan Wall. Coach Wall, welcome onto the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, we are happy to have you, Coach. First and foremost, congratulations on completing the year. It was a very weird and hectic year for a lot of your programs. I know your basketball team in particular, for those of you who don't know, Coach Dan Wall is also the head basketball coach over at Camp Verde High School for the boys program. But Coach, congratulations on finishing the spring semester. I know that it was canceled last year, but we came back this year and were able to complete it. A couple programs did pretty well. More specifically, the track and field team had a first place finisher in Ashley Bueller. She finished in number one in discus. So that's pretty cool. And I wanted to get your thoughts on the spring semester in general. You guys welcomed kids back as well not too long ago. You got rid of the mask mandates. A lot of changes for Camp Verde. Yeah, Coach Wall, I'm going to stop talking. How'd you feel the spring semester went?
Well, first of all, we're just so pleased to finally get some sports going again. It was pretty devastating, just the effect that it had to not be able to be participating last spring. Especially, we had some great baseball players, some great softball players, and some great athletes on the track too, and in throwing. So great to get some of those kids back out there. I know they were excited. The coaches were excited. And like you said, just a really neat opportunity to life going a little more towards the normal side of things again this spring. So some neat performances, some very difficult competition this spring. As you know, this was our first year in the 3A again after a long time back in the 2A, about 16 years. And so definitely an adjustment and some difficulty. But the kids, man, they fought, they worked really hard, improved a ton. So very proud of all of our programs. And you're exactly right. You mentioned Ashley, as the kid who came through and was able to get her state championship with the discus. So pretty exciting stuff. We were all very, very pleased for her.
Yes, very much so. And like you said, that transition from 2A to 3A this year, football, I believe, was the only sport that stayed in 2A this season. You're shaking your head, so I was correct. Correct. But like you mentioned, there were a lot of difficulties that came with going from 2A to 3A. More specifically, you talked about it. The softball team was looking like they were going to be a state contender in softball last year. Unfortunately, they do just happen to graduate all of their key players. And then you have that transition to the bigger competition at 3A from 2A. You kind of alluded to it a little bit, Coach, but let's go more on the positive side. In the off season, these coaches are going to get an opportunity to actually have their summer workouts. They're going to actually get a chance to do their youth camps. And we'll talk about some that you may have on the basketball side. But there's a lot of optimism, Coach, going into next season, regardless of the change from 2A to 3A, because they're actually going to get an off season.
Correct. That'll be so huge, and I know it wasn't just us that lost out on that time. We all experienced that as schools throughout the state and throughout the country, quite honestly. But the ability to be able to work with our kids, on the baseball field, on softball field, and for the rest of us as coaches too, that time spent out of season is invaluable, in shaping kids as athletes and quite honestly as people too. It's such an important thing to be able to have that time to spend with each other. And so I think that's really going to help all of our programs moving forward. So we as coaches are really looking forward to that time to spend with our kids.
Yeah, and then we're just getting kicked off here in the off season. School year starting to wrap up here. Coach, this spring you guys welcomed in a new softball coach in Clint Teague. Are there any other new coaches that are going to be coming in? Do we have any openings possibly out and about for the Camp Verde Cowboys?
Yeah, so right now our wrestling position is open and been posted. And as you know, Coach Allred has done just a great job with our kids and our program for the last several years. And, he still wants to be around a little bit. It's just very time consuming. And so, so that position is open and we're excited to fill with somebody who cares about kids and is ready to get after it. And also you mentioned Coach Teague, taking over our softball program and, like you said, not really any time to work with kids until the season officially kicked off. So, he's really excited to keep moving forward and working with those young kids and working with the kids coming up in the program. Great guy. He also teaches on our campus. He teaches our welding classes and a couple of our ag classes, connects with the kids well, cares about them, and knows his softball. And so we're really excited to have him as part of our staff.
Yeah, I did get a chance to speak with Coach Teague on the show, and I agree. I think he definitely has a good grasp on, the game of softball and teaching these kids. Like you said, he's a teacher at the school already. That's actually a great jumping off point to my next question, which is just kind of what your process is in hiring a new coach. We'll talk a little bit about teacher coaches in just a little bit, but what are you specifically looking for when you hire a new candidate to fill a position?
Yeah, so obviously the teacher coach is awesome just because they're able to see those kids day in and day out on campus and have that little extra connection with them in their lives every day, as they go to and from class. But number one, we've got to have somebody that cares about kids, that is excited about their development and not just talking about athletically, although that is a huge piece of what we want them to do. But they've got to grow as people. If they're part of a program at Camp Verde High School, that is our goal and our desire for each of these kids is to be incredible citizens as they move through athletics into the community, out of the community, into the rest of the state and the country. We want to be extremely proud of those kids and who they become and what they do for our world. And so those are all factors. Obviously as coaches, we're all very competitive people and we want to win games and matches, et cetera. But that can't come at the expense of the kids and what their growth needs to be. That's got to be the number one priority in any high school athletic endeavor. So that's one of the biggest things we look for. And then obviously somebody who's committed, who works hard, who's willing to put the hours in, because we mentioned it earlier. It is a huge commitment from a time standpoint to be a high school coach and run a high school program. And so we've been very blessed, to have some great coaches over here and people that do fit each of those criteria. So I'm looking forward to finding our next couple.
Yeah, no, it should definitely be interesting. And, you talk about sort of juggling that teacher aspect and also the coaching aspect. You yourself, as I mentioned, Coach Wall is the head coach for the boys basketball team at Camp Verde High School. He is also the athletic director. He is also a teacher on campus. So, Coach, my question is plain and simple. How do you juggle all of that during the school year?
Well, it can get a little busy for sure at times, but it's like I tell my students, if you find something that you love to do with your life, you really don't have to work a day, and obviously the hours are going to be the hours, and you'll find those hours, whatever you do in life. But if you're enjoying it, and if you're getting into kids' lives and helping them become successful and just enjoying that process and journey, then it can be a really neat experience. And so the thing probably that's most important is, to me, if you're married, you've got to have a spouse that's, supportive and able to be understanding of the long hours and the really busy times that life can afford as you go throughout those seasons. And so, my wife is just an incredible support, and we support each other in both of our coaching areas and stuff. And it's been a really neat thing.
That's very much so. Coach, you talk about it a little bit with sort of balancing all of that. Anything that you've learned, maybe some techniques that you can pass off to any new coaches who might be trying to balance two roles of coaching and also teaching? We'll leave the administrative part out of it because you're kind of a special example of somebody who does all three, the admin, the coaching, and the teaching. But is there anything that you kind of learned along the way that's worked for you that you feel people should know?
Yeah. So, number one is you just got to get through the first year. You can't base any future decisions off of your first year of teaching or your first year of coaching, because there's just so many new things that are thrown at you at once. As you move forward, Russ Schaefer used to teach math over here at Camp Verde, taught at Flag for a very long time. And he gave me great advice. He said, whatever you do from a teaching standpoint, try to get everything done when you're at school, because that way, as you go home, there's a separation and you have a chance to be able to spend time with your family and your kids. And that's a huge deal, particularly when you add in all the other athletic pieces and the after school events, et cetera. You just have to manage time very well. And so being organized, really trying to be on top of your details, it takes a minute, but if you can figure that portion of it out, you're going to be way ahead of the game. So that organization is huge. And I guess the last thing I would say is, really make sure you love it as you jump into it, because it is a challenging job and a challenging profession. But if you love to do it, you're going to be able to get through those difficult days and those hard moments, and you're going to enjoy the fun ones even more.
Again, we were speaking with athletic director for Camp Verde High School. That is Dan Wall. Coach Wall is also the boys basketball coach. We'll talk a little bit here about the basketball team. Coach, you guys finished the season with a playoff appearance, and looking forward to next season. You return some big stars. Your three top leading scorers, Chino Salasaria, junior Devin James. They're now seniors. Of course, all three of these guys are now seniors. They were juniors this year. And of course, Christoph Castro, all three of those guys, big pieces of your offense this year. Any guys we can expect coming up from the JV level next year that you're excited about?
Yeah, so there's a couple. I think another kid that needs mentioning is Chito Herrera, who was our big guy inside and really made some big strides this year as a sophomore. So we're looking forward to him having a great year next year as a junior and getting a little bit stronger, a little bit more athletic. So that'll be exciting. Christian Santabria is one of the kids off of our JV program who floated up just a little bit the last two games of the season. He's been working really hard in the off season, and we're excited to see the role that he can fit into a little bit. And you mentioned Christoph, but he broke his ankle about 8 games into the season last year, and we didn't have him down the stretch. So we were really excited to see him rehabbing and getting through his process, and can't wait to get him back on the floor, which is supposed to happen here in these next couple of weeks. So that's exciting. And then I do want to mention one more kid, and that's Alex Dale. He's also going to be a senior next year, and he had huge minutes for us down the stretch, played the one for us and made some big plays, got better defensively. So we're really looking forward to him and what he can do next year as well.
Yeah, definitely some exciting stuff for the basketball team there for Camp Verde High School going forward. Coach, any youth programs, any summer workouts coming up? What's the plan for the off season for your basketball team this year?
Yeah, so we try to keep everything we do to the month of June. Again, that family time, if we go past June, it gets pretty crazy. So we want to save some time. But right after school, this next week coming up, we have our youth basketball clinic. And so we do that for Camp Verde kids out here from 8 to 12:30 in the mornings. And we obviously couldn't do it last year, but we've had some great turnouts over the last 11 years that we've been doing it. And it looks like we've got a lot of kids signing up already. So we're looking forward to that. And then we'll be getting into, we host a Monday night league here at Camp Verde High School with 5 other teams that'll come over and play each Monday. And then tournaments on the weekends down at Grand Canyon and Arizona Christian and a couple other places down in Phoenix. So it's definitely makes for a busy June, but the kids have a blast and I have a blast. We just love it. It's a lot of fun.
Coach, you talked about it. Obviously, last summer, you guys weren't able to conduct any of those summer workouts or summer tournaments like you talked about. How important are those summer tournaments and workouts for the season coming up? Like you said, you do a lot in the month of June. So you give these kids basically July and most of August off before you're right back in with your regular season preparation. But in terms of importance, how important are those workouts?
Yeah, so we really wanted to challenge the kids this summer, particularly. I mean, we have a lot of returners who have been in the program for several years. And so we want them to be able to play against some very difficult competition this summer. And and we'll probably struggle sometimes. We'll probably do really well other times, but we want them to see some very difficult and great players so they can learn to raise their game to that next level. And so I think that's one of the biggest things in the summertime is it kind of gives that carrot to really work hard on your skills and your game. So you have these really fun games and tournaments to play and kind of see how you stack up. And that way you can take some things with you going into the rest of the summer on your own time and then into next season as far as where are our strengths, where are our weaknesses, how can we get better and prepare ourselves for the regular season.
Some changes that we will not see next year, but we will see the year after. So the season of 2022 going into 2023, for those of you who are listening, the implementation of the shot clock has made its way to the high school levels. A 35-second shot clock will be implemented at every level of high school basketball. Coach, well, I want to get your opinion on the rule itself and how it's going to change the game of high school basketball.
Yeah, well, obviously from two different hats, from the athletic standpoint, there's the financial, because you got to make sure to have everything prepared and installing your shot clocks and then finding somebody to consistently run it for each of those games, lower levels all the way through. So there's that piece to the puzzle that we've got to make sure to start thinking about and taking care of. And then from a coaching standpoint, as far as the adjustments, there's not going to be much change for 95% of the teams until the last 3 to 4 minutes of a basketball game.
Right.
And so just because the game itself is very fast these days, there's not a lot of teams who are going to hold the ball more than 35 seconds on a possession anyways. Other than, I'll give Fountain Hills as an example. They would take a minute plus off the clock. So, that will change how they have to play a little bit. But for most of us down the stretch, if we have a 4 or 5 point lead, we're going to try to run some time off, and get a good shot or get fouled. And so it changes from a strategy standpoint, because now you got to really work on how am I going to attack those last few minutes? How are we going to continue to be aggressive and not put ourselves in a difficult spot where we have to host up some crazy shot with 2 seconds left on the clock, up by 5 at the end of the game. It's so that'll be kind of fun trying to figure out some different strategy pieces for down the stretch in games.
Now, Coach, I obviously can only really speak about my experience, but maybe you can kind of clarify the history for me. I played high school basketball when I was growing up in California, and we had a shot clock in place. I remember running the shot clock for some of the varsity games when I was on JV. And that's obviously in California, like I said, and here in Arizona, it's a relatively new thing. So like I said, Coach, maybe you can fill in the gaps of the history if there was a shot clock at one point and then there wasn't. But if that's not the case, why do you think it has taken so long for Arizona to adopt this rule?
So a couple things. I personally have been in Arizona for 14 years. I grew up in Colorado where there was also not a shot clock. So as long as I've been here, we have not had a shot clock in Arizona. Went to college in California, so watched a lot of high school games with a shot clock. So I'm totally understanding what you're saying. As far as why it's taken so long, it's a great question. Arizona's pretty diverse. A lot of rural areas, versus the metro areas. And there's a lot of considerations to putting in a shot clock, like we mentioned, and so adding that third official was a big step a couple of years ago, because that's a must for the shot clock. And then we talked about the financial, and putting each of those things together. And the biggest thing from an AD standpoint is the NFHS just adopted the ability for states to choose their own shot clock this last voting period. As I'm sure you know, before they adopted that, Arizona follows the NFHS rules. And so because they didn't have that in their rules, Arizona also did not. Whereas I think California is a little, I'm not 100%, but I don't think they were quite NFHS only.
No, I believe California, I know the CIF is sort of the AIA of California. And I actually don't know a whole lot of the decision makings when it comes to that as well. I guess my focus has been Arizona for the past 6 or 7 years.
Sure.
But Coach, I got one last question for you before we leave. This is something I haven't gotten a chance to ask any athletic directors, but was actually a question that was presented to me after I interviewed the Northland Prep Academy athletic director, and was actually a show idea. So I want to ask you here, because I don't think we could fill an entire show with it, but COVID. Obviously, this year has been a challenge for everybody. I know here for me directly with my job as not only the sports director and the play-by-play guy, but also as the news editor when we host our program countywide. The implementation of Zoom has allowed us to sort of expand the number of guests that we can talk to. We kind of already work pretty separate, so it's not like we were working off campus or anything like that, as opposed to where you guys had a lot of remote learning early on. But Coach, I want to ask you, what did this pandemic teach you? I know we're not officially done with it, but we're looking at a normal off season this year. We're looking at a very normal fall season, which should lead into a normal winter and a normal spring. Fingers crossed, of course. Get vaccinated if you want to, is going to be my advice. But Coach, is there any sort of procedural things that you've now implemented that you're going to be going forward with, whether it be as a coach or as an administrator?
Well, first of all, you probably could fill 5 shows with COVID stuff.
You could. I don't think my producer Ryan would like it too much, but yeah.
We might all be tired of talking about it, but there's enough info out there. That's a really big question. I mean, I think you mentioned the technology piece, and that's been very helpful. Obviously, in the classroom, we've had to do all sorts of adjusting, as far as filling technology with Zoom and various other, avenues to teach our content. From an athletic standpoint, we use Zoom all the time with our meetings now. In fact, we just had our first in-person athletic director meeting last week, and it was so wonderful to be in the same room with all those people again, and catch up a little bit. But that was a great way to, do the interim part through Zoom, et cetera. I think the biggest effect or impact or maybe takeaway that we've had here at Camp Verde High School is just the value of human contact and what that does to people when there's not human contact. And I mean, you see that in sports because you do become so bonded as a group, as a team or a program or whatever. And when you lose that time spent together, we've seen some kids and some of us coaches, quite honestly, go through some very difficult stuff in life, and so the ability for us to come back together after this COVID and continue to be in person with each other each day, it's just been huge in all of us being able to move through some of those difficult things. And so I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me from a sports side. Just the people in sports make sports special. Sports are fun, but the relationships developed within sports, and that they will last forever. And that's one of my favorite things about sports.
Camp Verde High School Athletic Director Dan Wall, thank you very much for coming on the program. Congratulations on finishing this entire crazy year. We look forward to seeing the Cowboys back on the football field, the basketball court, the volleyball court, tennis field, every single sport. No, it's at the tennis field, tennis court, I should say. But regardless, Coach, thank you very much for taking the time.
You got it. Thanks so much for having me, man. We appreciate all you guys do.
Of course, anytime. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be joined by Flagstaff track and field coach Mathew Barquin. Stay with us here on Off the Bench. We're going to take a trip up to Northern Arizona. Stay with us.
Two things we can count on every year.
A new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome back to Off the Bench. I am joined now by Flagstaff High School track and field coach Mathew Barquin. Coach Barquin, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me back.
Well, we're happy to have you back. First and foremost, congratulations on completing the spring season. COVID has obviously been an absolute nightmare of everything here in northern Arizona, but thankfully, as opposed to 2020, here in 2021, we were able to get the regular season, and while we're not finished with the state qualifier or state finals just yet, we're getting most of them completed right now, and we're definitely going to be finishing them. So, Coach, in terms of the regular season, how'd you feel it went as a whole?
You know, it went well. We had a lot of young kids and some kind of new names pop up, and I was proud of how much they had to put in the effort and work. So I was really happy in how the season went this year.
Moving on now to the playoffs, you did have a few state qualifiers throughout the entire playoffs, more specifically in the AIA State Track and Field Championship this past weekend. You guys completed that. How did that go? And I know you did have some top 10 finishers, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but just again, sort of as a whole, Coach, how'd those state qualifiers go? Or finals?
They went well. I tell athletes it's really hard to PR at the state meet. I mean, you have the stress, you have the heat, you have so many parents and fans there that it's hard to hit a personal record at a state meet. And we had quite a few of our athletes hit a personal record, it's a huge thing to do.
I did see you had a couple record. I took a look at the Facebook, or not the Facebook page, the actual team page on the Flagstaff website, and saw that there were a few record breakers in 2019, but no record breakers in 2021 this year for the team records. Not this time, there, Coach.
Not this year.
So we're hoping for next year, but. Looking more for the playoffs, of course, like I mentioned, you had a couple top 10 finishers. More specifically, let's start on the girls' side. Again, top 10 finishers on both sides, but we'll start with the girls. Sophomore Brooke Golightly finished finished ninth in the 3,200-meter run, and then the relay team for the girls' side finished seventh in the 4x400-meter relay finals, and finished eighth in the prelims for the 4x400. But Coach, in terms of the girls' side, who else stood out? And how's it feel to get a couple top 10 finishers this year?
We were excited. Our 4x4 team definitely surprised us. It's a group of our soccer girls that came out kind of a little late. They're sophomores, which is something really excited that they made finals as sophomores, which is a huge feat on its own. But they surprised us that we didn't know how strong they were going to be, and they kind of realized how strong they could be at track and went pretty far. And then Brooke as well. Being all these girls pretty young, that we're stoked to have them for the next couple of years to build on top of what we saw this year. And then Mckenna Mitchell, another one of our soccer cross-country girls that just kept growing and growing and growing. Right. It was awesome to see how much she's improved this year.
Yeah, that's got to be good for you in terms of confidence going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the returners, of course, a little bit later in the interview. But to get such good production early on from your freshman and sophomore class, because, I mean, as you know, Coach, going forward, when you've got returners who have experience at such a young age, they just get better and better as the years go on.
Yeah, that's definitely the big hope. We did have one senior, one of our power seniors, Danny Shanahan, graduating this year, that did amazing. She qualified in probably, if we'd have pressed it, probably 6 events, but we had to pull her back a little bit and focus on some things that she could have a chance of scoring at. But awesome year.
Yeah, very much so. Coach, on the boys' side, of course, junior Lance Harris finished 9th in the 600-meter run finals. Senior Graham Norris finished 6th in the pole vault. And, of course, junior Nicholas Harju. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, pretty close. Harju.
Yeah, well, your last name is interesting as well. So
yes.
He finished 9th in discus. Anyone else, again, on the boys' side, much like we talked about with the girls, anybody really stand out this year?
So my other one would be Ryan Hatch, who's a junior, who's getting closer and closer every year. And then Scott Palmer, who's my hurdler this year. He PR'd in both of his hurdle races. So it just shows me he's getting ready for that next year, kind of getting that penultimate step in.
Coach, when you're putting together, you talked a little bit about the relay team consisting of a couple soccer girls for the girls side, and you do have a relay team, of course, on the boys side. How do you kind of pick that team together? I mean, I know it's with track and field, it's kind of a mix of people who, not necessarily play track and field all year round. You have a couple that are solely track and field, but for the most part, it's basketball players or soccer players or cross country players. So how do you kind of build that chemistry within your relay team when a lot of these kids are coming from different sports?
It's trial and error throughout the season. I mean, we have 13 varsity invites and then a handful of JV non-qualifiers that you just test them out. Hey, I'm going to put this team here and they're going to try over here. And you kind of just test out the water so you find that good match.
And of course, you're looking obviously for speed. So you do kind of put in a lot of those soccer players and cross country players into that relay team. And
Yep.
Who do the football guys fit in? Are they more of your javelin throwers and your shot put? That's the one I was thinking of.
So that's my mission for next year, is to get more football guys out here. We only had about probably like 5 or 6. That's my mission for next year, is to get them out here. But a lot of our fastest boys are football players.
Okay.
So that's a task for me for next year.
Which again is a common theme we see a lot in track and field. Is kind of a hodgepodge of bits and pieces of different programs, players, and we'll talk a little bit later in the interview about kind of growing at the youth level and possibly talking a little club track and field here. But again, we're speaking with Flagstaff High School track and field coach Mathew Barquin. Coach, coming up this current weekend, will we see any Eagles in the state decathlon/heptathlon? I think I said that correctly. Heptathlon. Will we see any in either of those?
So that's something that we're super stoked about. We had all 5 of our kids get entered and accepted. So this year they took, I believe, on the boys side, 27, on the girls, 28, regardless of division. And we had all 5 of our athletes get accepted. So 4 boys and 1 girl. That'll be completing on Monday and Tuesday. It's usually on the weekend. They moved it to Monday and Tuesday.
Okay, so it'll be on Monday and Tuesday. We'll see how Flagstaff does in that. Best of luck, Coach. Congratulations on state qualifiers for that as well. So getting back to the team, any sort of newcomers that really kind of shined out? You talked about a couple of them, as obviously we mentioned on the girls' side. There were some freshmen and sophomore that really showed out this year. Any most improved players who kind of maybe struggled a little bit kind of last year? I know the season was canceled, but just anybody who really kind of stepped up their game this year?
I got to put my hats off to my sophomore class, because they didn't have a freshman year of, well, what's track? So really the sophomore class of stepping up and going, all right, let's restart. Our 4x4 girls team was all sophomores. On the other side, on the boys side, we had a lot of freshman boys step up because they saw that there was a gap in the team, that we had graduated a bunch of boys and some of our cross country kids didn't come out, that they're like, oh, I can go to varsity invites if I just push forth and, get that work in. So hats off to them of committing.
Yeah, very much so. And it's great to get that commitment early on. And like I mentioned earlier, once you get those younger players with that kind of experience, they go into the next year basically knowing what you expect and being able to meet that new level of expectation. Because obviously, somebody who finishes 7th, next year, you're going to go, okay, well, we're going to finish 1st next year. We're not just going to finish 7th. So hats off to you for that. And we look forward to seeing what the Flagstaff track and field team does next season. But Coach, any players looking to go to the next level and compete in track and field in college?
So we have one senior, Danny Shanahan, that she's hoping. She's not sure which school. She's been bouncing back and forth between a few, but her hope is to go to the next level. U of A has been thrown out there, a few different sites that she's looking at. A big thing is she's our single female that qualified for the heptathlon. So hopefully if she can perform well, some of those college coaches can snag her.
Hopefully a future Wildcat coming off the Flagstaff Eagles roster for Coach Barquin. Coach, looking forward to next season. Obviously, you're going to get some big returners back. I mentioned Lance Harris, Brooke Golightly. Anybody now from the JV team that might be making their way up to the varsity level next year, or any incoming freshmen that you're excited about?
Yeah, there's quite a few off the JV-ish roster that kind of flirted. We took them to a few varsity invites that definitely have potential. We just got to get them in the weight room, get a little more muscle on them, because when they come in as scrawny little freshmen, it's a long season without that muscle support. So definitely have some kids that we're keeping our eye on for next year.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun going back into next season. What about the off season, Coach? I mean, for track and field, I know, like I mentioned, you're kind of picking your team as the season starts because you're getting a lot of that cross recruiting of kids playing different sports. So, how do you prepare for the off season, and what are your plans for the off season?
So usually this summer I kind of give the kids off just because a lot of them branch out to those other sports. Spring football is going. We have cross country already kicking up in a few weeks. So I usually during the summer I leave them alone. And then usually about November we'll start our winter track program and start getting those kids that aren't doing a sport, or they're done early from basketball or before basketball, or they finish football, that we can start working on a little sooner.
What about you personally, Coach? Is there anything that you do to sort of keep your coaching skills sharp throughout the off season?
So I usually every year attend the Arizona, I can't even remember off the top of my head, but they have some education courses that I'll usually kind of pick on, especially those field events that I might not be fully comfortable with, and then just keep in shape myself, because every once in a while I think I can run with them and I'm like, oh, maybe not. So trying to stay in shape as well.
Are there any events that you, through doing those courses, have kind of gained a little bit more knowledge on?
So I try to mix it up every year. Javelin's been the one, especially with Javelin just coming back into high school athletics. That's the one I've been kind of picking on as much as I can, because that's just a weakness since we didn't even throw Javelin when I was in high school.
I got an opportunity to throw a javelin while I was covering the track team for Grand Canyon University when I attended there. And I still have no idea how to properly throw one. I was taught how to do it. I still have no clue how to properly throw a javelin. He was like, throw it like a dart. And I'm like, this is way bigger than a dart. And it kept moving. Maybe I need to take a couple courses, but throwing the javelin is a lot of fun when you actually know how to do it.
Yes, I agree.
The guy who ended up, who's showing me, one of the participants, he's not there anymore, but he kind of threw it with ease. I threw it about maybe 60 yards downfield, probably less than that, maybe like 20 or 25 yards down. I don't know why I said 60. He hucked it like maybe 100 yards downfield with no issue, and we were doing a throw competition. But me aside, Coach, I want to ask you a little bit about sort of growing the sport of track and field. I keep bringing it up, but obviously your roster consists of kids who play other sports. So I know it's kind of hard to make a dedicated club track team. So in terms of youth track and field, I mean, how do you kind of approach building the interest in track and field in younger kids?
So that's something that's actually kind of been a pet project of mine since I've been at Flag High, is building that program. I'm in talks with a couple of the elementary schools to do kind of little youth kind of field days, like they've been used to be called, to start at the elementary years. And then also been in communication with a few other coaches about starting a club track team up in Flagstaff. That's something that we've tried before and then it's kind of fallen off the back burner, but it's something that we've been in talk. And then of course, COVID happened. So it's been put on the back burner for a little bit, but it's something that we're trying to get moving again. Even if we're not going to go to any of those tournaments or any of those meets, right, at least get the kids going, experiencing the hurdles or high jump, pole vault, those things that they want to try, but they always ask in the middle of the season. It's like, now is not the time to try to learn how to pole vault. Try to get them experience before the season even starts.
Yeah, and that very much could be a good start. I know, you probably do have a couple players who, like we said, maybe play more sports closer to the winter. So their off-season schedule may not be as heavy. And you might, I believe you do have like a couple track and field only players, I believe. And, and I'm sure you can attract a few players, who, maybe they didn't make the tennis team, or maybe they didn't make the basketball team and they want to give track and field a shot. So they go to that club workout, or they join the club team, or whatever it might be. But I agree. I think that could be a very good start to sort of building, like you mentioned, sort of doing those field days for the little kids, just building that interest for the sport and getting more full-time track and field participants, as opposed to kids who are like, well, Coach Barquin, I want to come out to summer practice, but I'm kind of the starting quarterback of the football team, so I don't really know if I can make it. But something like that really could kind of spark the interest and get some things going.
Mm-hmm. That's the hope, at least.
Yeah, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. But definitely kind of keep us in the loop here. I want to ask you a question here. I got a chance to speak with Coach Art Griffith, which that interview will be coming up next week. So definitely check that out on Off the Bench. Coach Griffith is the baseball coach for Winslow High School baseball. He is retiring after 50 plus years on the team. But I asked him sort of his opinion on being a teacher/coach. You yourself teach at Flagstaff High School. I got his opinion, and I want to ask you as well. What are your opinions on sort of being a teacher coach? And do you find a lot of positives of kind of being around those kids 24/7 as opposed to being a coach who kind of, you check in when you get closer to the season and then you kind of step away?
It's a huge part of my job because I see them in multiple areas. I can keep track of them a little more. And even putting athletics aside, I'm just another advocate to make sure they're academically where they need to be.
Right.
I can kind of track them. I always have the JV girls soccer team added to my teacher page so I can pick on them as much as I can. So it's not even just athletics, academics as well, where I can support them, which is huge. And then it's easier to make that relationship
right,
and build more of a stronger bond with those kids.
And of course, then right around when track and field season comes around, that there's a couple football players, a couple soccer players who might be in your classroom and you go, hey, what are the odds you might want to do track and field? We're looking for another hurdler, or we're looking for another part of our relay team. But Coach Barquin, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. Congratulations on finishing the season, and congratulations to your team for reaching the state qualifiers and had a couple top 10 finishers. I know the season isn't done just yet. On Monday and Tuesday, Flagstaff will be competing in the state decathlon and heptathlon, which I probably said wrong again. But Coach, congratulations on the season.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. Like I mentioned, next week we'll get a chance to speak with Winslow baseball coach Art Griffith about his career, a very interesting story about his time in Venezuela coaching the Olympic baseball team. And we'll also kind of check in with Coach Bob Young of Bradshaw Mountain High School. So check out that interview next week. Coach Barquin, thank you for taking the time, sir.
Of course, no problem. Anytime.
Want to thank all my guests for coming on the show this week. Flagstaff baseball coach Michael DoBosh, and of course, Camp Verde athletic director Dan Wall, and coach Mathew Barquin for coming on the show. And of course, what a great way to end the show, messing up my guest's name. But we're going to hear it off the bench. I'm Philip Katafma, wishing you a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.